Welcome to Nailing It Down, and we continue our long march through the critiques of the Gotha program's histories. All plural. No. The draft program letters, or the critique of the Gotha program, as it's commonly called, was really made most famous by Lenin using it as a linchpin of his argument in the State and Revolution. And we're going to get to that. But I was trying to figure out how to order the kind of classical interpretations of the critique of the Gotha program and what to cover next. I realized that there's the initial letters that we've already discussed. There may even be a couple more I'm going to see if I can dig up, maybe as an appendix to these series. But then when Engels published this in 1891 with his attempt to engage with and then endorse the Erfurt program of 1891 after Marx's death, it's unclear how fundamental this letter was until Lenin. But, and this is a big but, Daniel DeLeon actually considered it important, at least contemporaneously to Lenin. He seems to have mentioned it for the first time in a letter to a newspaper, the editorial group of the Socialist Labor Party of America, in 1900. In fact, the letter of Marx that he referred to was what we would later call the draft program letter, or the critique of the Gotha program, in 1900, and the Daily People in January 7th. He also wrote a polemic about this before Lenin put it as crucial in State and Revolution, which is why I bring it up. It's a polemic called Did Marx Err? From 1911. Now that's, as you can probably guess, about a half decade, a little more, before Lenin published State and Revolution. And while I'm sure there are probably second and international discussions of this in German, I don't have them. So we're going to have to go with DeLeon as the earliest thing I can easily find access to about the interpretation of the critique of the Gotha program. In 1922, after State and Revolution was published, although I'm not sure if it was available in English yet. That's a good question for me. I'm going to have to look that up before we get to the State and Revolution essay. This polemic from 1911, this letter from 1900, and an actual early translation of the Gotha critique was released to the Socialist Labor Party as a 50-cent pamphlet. Now, the Socialist Labor Party has made copies of this available. There's one from 2005, and that's the one I'm using, and it's freely available online. So we're going to go to the section called Did Marx Err, and also the editorial notes. We're going to start with the editorial notes first. We're going to skip the National Executive Committee of the Socialist Labor Party's republication and translation of the program, but we're going to pick up here on why it may have been important in America pretty early on. I will admit that I am new to Daniel DeLeon's use of critique of the Gotha program, so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. All right, this is the initial letter, editorial committee by Daniel DeLeon to the Daily People. The letter of Marx printed on the 7th page of this issue is valuable as it is hard reading. Let it not be superficially skimmed over. Fusion always implies abandonment of principle. The point must not be overlooked in our generation. All right. And this is from the original preface. This publication in pamphlet form of Marx's Criticism of the Gotha Program, printed for the first time in English in the Daily People, January 7th, 1900. And I want you to notice that it is DeLeon's people who printed the Gotha critique in English for the first time. So the SLP is and the SLP Predates the Socialist Party. In many ways, DeLeon was too sectarian to join in with Debs, but it is interesting to me how crucial DeLeon is to getting Marxism in English in America out. All right. Will unquestionably fill a long want. This is not only so because the position of Marx in the realm of sociology and economics is such that whatever he has to say on any subject related to these topics is more than of ordinary interest, but because what he has to say on this particular subject is intrinsically of more than ordinary interest. Moreover, as is often the case with polemics of this kind, they have as more or less value in retrospect as it had originally when applied to the contemporary issue. The German social democracy, which was the immediate results of the compromises of Gotha, has been tried and found thoroughly wanting. Remember, this is from 1922. In the hour when its followers, admirers, and imitators looked to it as a possible savior, or at least as a fearless champion that would go down if necessary, attempting to stem the tide of onrushing madness. But born and reared in compromise, it is bound to remain true to its nature, even when its supreme test is put upon it. Hence, the Eberts, the Snydermans, and the Sudakums become servile tools of the German junker capitalist class during the war, holding the sponge of chloroform to the nose of the German proletariat. DeLeon sounds a lot like Lenin. What the Gotha Compromise accomplished above all other things, as DeLeon so clearly shown in the editorial, which is published together with Marx's article in this pamphlet, was to prevent for a time being the formation of a true party of socialism in Germany in opposition to the social democracy, which was throughout and could not have been otherwise a radical bourgeois party. You'll notice that this did not begin with Trotskyists or MLs. This is already an accusation being thrown by the Socialist Labor Party very early. In lieu of such a party of socialism, the social democracy could only impose its views and doctrines upon the German proletariat as general in socialism. Moreover, because of its size and apparent influence, it was able to assume the role of leader of the world revolutionary forces. On the other hand, had there ever existed in Germany a true party of socialism, such as Marx advocates, during the decade prior to the outbreak of World War, the social democracy would have at least been subject to challenge and criticism. We do not say this under those conditions. Such a sound party of socialism would have been able to wrest the leadership out of the hands of social democracy, much less present the disaster of World War. This is before World War II, by the way, guys. This is, I think, from 1920. This was probably written in 1921. But it would certainly have prevented, to a great extent at least, the smudge produced by the actions of social democracy from staining the garment of socialism. When the split finally came, and inevitably it had to come, it was too late to prevent the damage. To the independent socialists, certainly, and to the communists to a certain extent, attached much of the odium that belongs to social democracy. So the independent socialists are the group that was formed by Kautsky and Bernstein later that was anti-war, and the communists are clearly the Bolsheviks, and then later on the KPD. It would take years to shake this off, and by that many years retard the progress of true socialism in Germany and correspondingly elsewhere. But there is another reason why the publication of Marx's criticism is most timely just now. So far as we know it contains Marx's only direct reference to the authority of the phrase dictatorship of the proletariat. There were other references, but they weren't commonly printed at the time. As such, this letter of Marx has taken on tremendous importance to those who unthinkingly conclude that as the Russians did it, so we must do. So this is why the SLP, the Socialist Labor Party, didn't really want to join with the Third International. And remember, that's a live question in 1921, 1922. I.e., seeing the Russian Revolution has found it necessary to pass through a prolonged period of proletarian dictatorship, these obsessed or shallow thinkers cannot conceive otherwise than that every country must necessarily pass through the same tortuous stages. Such imitators of greatness naturally require to their that their belief must rest upon orthodox authority, and to them Marx's name is only to conjure with. So often and loudly has the authority for the dictatorship been based upon Marx's Gotha program. Again, this is already in 1922. All right, people are saying that the Gotha program is being abused as early as 1922. And Lenin's framework for the Gotha program and State and Revolution is not even 5 years old when this editorial note is there. And it's before, like the did Lenin era is before this time period. So we have to really think about this, okay? Let's put this thing in context. This is written in 1921, 1922. It's published in 1922. It's right after World War II. It's right after the beginnings of the Third International and the foundation of the American Communist Party. And why isn't the Socialist Labor Party joining up with it? And they're going to actually interpret the Gotha program as part of why, but also they're going to accuse them of misreading it. And remember, they are the people who published it first in English. We've already established that. The SLP, the first people who published the Marxist letter in 1900 in the U.S. in English, and they are people who polemicized about it before Lenin did. We often forget this when we talk about the history of American communism. Now, the SLP was notoriously sectarian, and like I said, it couldn't even join up with the SPA, the Socialist Party of America, because Debs and DeLeon didn't get along. And in fact, DeLeon actually even kind of took up the Council Communist position of making sure that they had their own union, so the DeLeon people had their own IWW separate from the IWW. So, we do have to keep that in mind. But I don't think DeLeon was actually listed as part of the ultra-left or any of that. And remember, this is a very early interpretation here and a very early dispute with the Bolsheviks. To such seekers for authority who, of course, in the most cases have never seen this criticism, the publication of this letter at this time cannot fail to act as a douche of cold water. It will prove almost a revelation, no doubt, that Marx and this connection to the dictatorship of the proletariat only offhand and incidentally, and that dictatorship is not the issue in this discussion, but merely pulled in, as it were, to illuminate a point. This comes up in the other times dictatorship of the proletariat is mentioned. Marx at this juncture is ridiculing mercilessly the Lassallean notion of a free state, showing that some of the beatitudes demanded by the Lassalleans were already free in states such as Switzerland and the United States, puncturing his argument by emphasizing that the proletarian state in a period of transition of the capitalist system into a communist society can be nothing but a revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. And here DeLeon actually mirrors later arguments by people like Hal Draper. Or DeLeon's party. I'm not sure this is actually DeLeon. In other words, what he desired here is to emphasize that the state is a state, whether it be proletarian or bourgeois, and that a state will always be an organ of suppression. This is actually something that Lenin agrees with DeLeon on. It's not in the section of State and Revolution. We're going to read about the critique of the Gotha program, but it actually is in State and Revolution. Whether this political transition period be long or short, hard or easy, violent or peaceful, does not seem to concern him, for, contrary to the dictatorship advocates of today, he wastes neither time nor energy upon it. But what did concern him, and what did give him time and his entire framework, his entire life work too, was the abolition of capitalism. And incidental to this event, as he clearly showed, the state in any form would be abolished or would die out. This is not the place for extended consideration of what at the present time is generally and rather loosely referred to the dictatorship of the proletariat, but this might be said. Conditions may arise in Europe, especially in the industrial backwards countries, we're talking about Russia, that make this dictatorship inevitable. Here DeLeon's actually mirroring Kautsky's debate with Trotsky. Or at least the proper thing. Here in the United States, it is out of place and would, in fact, become a hindrance an encumbrance to the ordinary progress of revolution, and would very readily be turned into an instrument of reaction. To the extent that proletarian dictatorship elsewhere may be required to meet the emergency created by the successful military insurrection or collapse of capitalism, is to the same extent the industrial unions fills the need here. The industrial union, by its very nature, bars the capitalist and hence its henchmen from all participation in the affairs of the industrial commonwealth. This is the dream of the IWW, by the way, both the DeLeonist and Debsian forms, i.e. that the capitalists will have little chance to vote on matters pertaining to the revolution and its fruits as King George had in the struggle with the American colonists. In the nature of things, the workers will have absolute control. That is, however, is not dictatorship except in the shallow bourgeois sense. It is just the law of revolution as expressed through the useful majority in society. DeLeon most aptly said, speaking in this or as passions of Marx, Marx is not a quotation nor a series of quotation. His work is varied and his activities constitute a comprehensive standard of the working class theory and practice. And it is by this standard that he must be invoked, if invoked at all. Any other course would be an injustice, not only to Marx, but to all concerned. Well, sometimes I like DeLeon. What are you going to say? Marx's criticism of the Gotha program should not only be read, but it should be studied, thoroughly comprehended. It cannot fail to act as the best possible antidote to all kinds of reform programs and immediate demands, whether these be advocated by the avowed bourgeois reformers or so-called socialists of the Socialist Party type, taking Debs as people here and at the formation of the Communist Party of America. And yet by persons who do lip service to Russia and communism and put on due amounts of red paint while attempting a political reform stunt, as for example, the offspring and character of the SP, the Workers' Party in this country. Fusion, in the words of DeLeon, always implies abandonment of principle. As a younger Liebknecht put it, not all unity means strength. Unity between fire and water puts fire out and causes water to disappear as steam. Unity between a wolf and a lamb results in the lamb finding itself inside the wolf. Unity between the proletariat and the ruling class is a sacrifice of proletariat. Unity with traitors means defeat. The Socialist Labor Party has ever fought fusion and compromise. That's why they were super sectarian. Being a truly Marxian organization, it will continue to fight to the dismay and terror of the enemies and explorers of the revolutionary working class movement. The Publishers, New York, August 1922. We'll come back to DeLeon's specific polemic from 1911. But I think it's really important to get that this was already contested and the Gotha critique was already seen as being abused. We can already see traits labor attributed to Karl Cohost because he is super important for a more leftward reading. And in debates between, let's say, modernly Kevin Anderson and Lars Lee, which we're going to go on, and I think both Lars Lee and Anderson score different points on different things, we can already see this heading up as early as 1911 and 1922 in the United States. This is to remind you that none of these debates are new. I will be adding this to the link of reference materials in this so you can read this on your own. Thank you, and let's keep nailing it down. Like and subscribe, click to follow. You can find more behind the Patreon. Have a great day.